Ben Dameron,
Present in Kalamazoo County, and I will do want to note that I do have to leave at 1 o'clock today. Sorry.
Patrice Griffin,
Here, City of Kalamazoo.
Kim Hollers, Bobby Hopewell,
Present in Kalamazoo County.
Brenda Hughes, Sakia Lee,
Present in Kalamazoo County.
Carol McGlynn,
President Kalamazoo County.
Jonathan Pulley,
Present Calhoun County.
Alyssa Stewart.
Present in Kalamazoo County.
May we have a motion to excuse the absent members?
So moved.
Moved by Cooney,
Supported by Lee.
supported by Lee. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. All right, motion carried. Good enough. Approval of the minutes of our last meeting. You should have received those from Coordinator Ford. Are there any changes, questions, additions? I welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by McGlynn,
Support Dameron.
supported by Damaro. Is there discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. And you should have the agenda for today, which we're already operating on, so that's kind of interesting. You should have the agenda for today. Are there any changes or adjustments to the agenda? We will make note that committee member Hollers has just joined us. Welcome, ma'am. All right. Mr. Ford, or officers, are there any reports, boards, or subcommittees or anything?
No.
All right, we are at 6A, SBK Nominating Committee Candidate Recommendation. I don't remember who the chair is of that, but you know who you are, so feel free to speak up.
I don't think we nominated the chair, but
Oh,
but basically we had a vacancy or have a vacancy from Mrs. Lewis's departure, and nominating committee worked on filling that vacancy. Before we had a vacancy, Jonathan Pulley filled that vacancy, and during that time we interviewed a slate of some good solid candidates, and with Ms. Lewis's departure, we went back, reached out to one of those candidates, and that's John Oliver. And I submitted information about that candidate to you all for review. And this is just to discuss and vote on if we want to move that candidate for city commission approval.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Ford. The floor is open for discussion or a motion.
I move that we add John Oliver to our group.
Moved by Cooney,
Support.
supported by Hughes. Still in discussion? McGlynn?
I was just going to say, I'm not on the committee, but I do know Dr. Oliver and have worked with him through communities and schools. And I think he's a really great addition to our team here.
Thank you.
I would echo that in terms of discussion, have worked really closely with him at the Promise. We'll soon be neighbors again. I think that John would do phenomenal and add some insight and input that we may have a gap for here.
Okay. Mr. Ford, roll call, please.
All right. Don Cooney,
Yes.
Ben Dameron,
Yes.
Patrice Griffin,
Yes.
Kim Hollers,
Present.
Director Hollers, we need, we're voting on Mr. Oliver, so we need a yay or a nay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Bobby Hopewell,
Yes.
Brenda Hughes,
Yes.
Sakia Lee,
Yes.
Carol McGlynn,
Yes.
Jonathan Pulley,
Yes.
and Alyssa Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. The motion is carried. We will forward Dr. Oliver's name on to the city commission for their approval. 6B, Mr. Ford.
All right, so last month we had a presentation from Antonio Mitchell, manager for the Community Investment Division out of Community Planning and Economic Development. This month, we're going to have a presentation from Cheryl Ann Parsons. I believe her title is Housing Development Project Coordinator. If that's incorrect, she could correct me. But she wants to talk to us about the housing efforts that the city is engaged in and open it up for any questions or discussions you may have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Cheryl Ann Parsons. She probably needs some help putting up a PowerPoint. So if IT can help.
Before she goes forward, if you hang on 1 second, Member Hughes, if you can adjust your camera so your mouth can be seen for those that may not be able to those that might need to read lips or what have you. So thank you.
All right.
Ms. Parsons, all yours, I believe.
Okay, so I do need help if I can get this PowerPoint loaded here. Maybe I have a share screen. Oh, I do. Okay, so thank you for having me this afternoon. I just wanted to talk about what's happening in the Community Investment Division in the area of housing. So I joined the city of Kalamazoo in February and started working primarily on the single family ownership opportunities and development strategies. So that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about, how we strategically approach the ownership side of housing, but there is some scattering of the multifamily. So within Community Investment Division, it's important just to be reminded that everything that we are working on funnels down from the various plans that we work through. So starting with Imagine Kalamazoo, the master strategic plan, we look at all of the neighborhood plans. Every one of the core neighborhoods, which are the Community Development Block Grant federal designated neighborhoods, have a housing request or desire. So we're looking at all of the neighborhood plans for any of our housing development. We have a HUD consolidated plan that we work through, looking through single family ownership, and then community collaboration, and then I'm looking for strategic alignment when I'm working with developers on housing. So the various picture is worth 1,000 words. So the various plans, Imagine Kalamazoo. Throughout any given year, we might have additional plans like the analysis to impediments that recently came out. So we're looking at those and thinking, how do we integrate all of the information we have to actually create housing opportunities? So when we think about approaching the plans we have and how we're going to tie in the housing goals, really, if you're not really familiar with the master strategic plan, what we're primarily working under in the goals for Imagine Kalamazoo is, if you want to reference complete neighborhoods, we're also working in safe community. There is some overlap with economic vitality, which is why I think that Antonio delivered his presentation last month and I'm coming in second, because there is some cross collaborations that happen there. And then we're also looking for responsible development. So when we look at what federal funds or opportunities are out there, we're trying to find what responsible redevelopment can we bring to Kalamazoo. So housing development challenges and solutions. I have a primary slide here that I'm going to break down in subsequent slides. But when we think about the challenges of housing in the city of Kalamazoo, one of the first and foremost components that we have to look at is that we just have an older housing stock. And so when we think about the older housing stock, we have to think about how do we integrate and preserve our existing housing stock, as well as do the traditional that people think about with housing, which is just build new houses. But we also want to take advantage of the existing housing stock we have, both that is owned already and both that is just available for additional redevelopment. So we're looking at preserving the existing house stock as much as possible. And then we're looking at access to long-term affordable housing. What strategies can we bring that bring long-term affordable housing to the city of Kalamazoo? And this has to be presented with a variety of housing options. We have a variety of different owners, and so we need a variety of housing to fit the need. We're also looking at the creation of infill housing. So we don't have large tracts of land to build new neighborhoods, but we have a lot of individual parcels in existing neighborhoods. So when you build on those individual parcels within an existing neighborhood, it's called infill housing. So we're trying to figure out how to fill in, sometimes people call it the missing teeth, those parcels that you got three or four vacant parcels on the street or in a neighborhood where there are a bunch of other really cool housing opportunities. So we're looking at the challenge for the tools and resources for large scale projects. So taking on an infill strategy that might have 15 to 20 houses going up at one time to really impact and move the market. And then we're looking at just what analysis of impediments to fair housing do we deal with in the city. So the solutions that we really look to are building partnerships. We need to build partnerships. The city needs to build partnerships with the developers, the residents, the home buyers, the people who train for home ownership, the lenders, to build these partnerships for development. We're looking to build partnerships or maximize and optimize the federal, the state, and the local funding that we receive, both for the rehabilitation of existing homes or units. Right now, I'll talk further a little bit later in the presentation about a partnership that we have with a nonprofit through HUD, Housing and Urban Development funding for lead-based paint safe programs. We have a code enforcement program that is launched here at the city in conjunction with a nonprofit. We have repair programs that we do in partnership with various agencies. And then we also look for the solution of new construction. When we're looking at the solutions, we have to see, does our existing zoning match with what we want to do? And so there was a rezoning effort and is still a rezoning effort going on, because one of the solutions that we came up with was in direct response to the challenge that we had a lot of non-conforming parcels just because the zone was somewhat obsolete. And so to look through and create a new zoning strategy that would actually match what's happening in today with both the development and the market. We look at, is there any incentive policies that need to be initiated, land use and strategic planning, looking at scattered site infill strategies. Once again, the variety of housing types. And right now we're investigating what a shared equity homeownership program or land trust would look like in the city. So when we think about planning for development, and I sort of broke this, I just am not as PowerPoint savvy as I need to be, but imagine these in bubbles versus boxes. So we think in kind of three bubbles when we think about development. We think about planning, what needs to happen for planning, land use, zoning, is there an opportunity zone that could be taken advantage of? Would a developer benefit from having a neighborhood enterprise zone, which would help to offset some of the the end taxes for property owner taxes for the buyer. Maybe there's cool new development units or ideas that can come forth. So in creating affordability, one of the things we're looking at is accessory dwelling units, which is where maybe an apartment is above a detached garage. And what could that bring for affordability in the city? And also what could that bring for a wealth generator for the owner? So there could be a win-win in that strategy. So thinking about the different types of units that come to Kalamazoo, we also started thinking, if we're going to engage resident developers or builders or the small scale developer, would it be beneficial to possibly have some pre-permitted plans where these plans were vetted already through site review committee and already have in place all of the fees factored in, and there could be a purchase to buy a pre-permitted plan off the shelf, and it's somewhat of a plug and play model. So we actually are working on finalizing some of those pre-permitted plans. So we do hope to have some of those available by the fourth quarter of this year. We also might look at if there's a tax incentive financing or a TIF that could come in play to help the developer to recoup some of the cost that they can't recoup right away because the cost to build is maybe less than what they can get on the market for rent or for purchase. And so we work to think about what type of plan can we put in place with the developer or working with brownfield for redevelopment. And then once again, as I mentioned, working with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, with any lead or federal programs that might be available. So that's the one bubble that we're looking at. Then with that, we think, okay, if we have the plans in place where people can actually start to go out and build, what might be needed? So we look at funding and incentives, might be looking at a payment in lieu of taxes, working to assist with low-income housing tax credits. We have housing gap financing. So if a developer comes in and there's a gap because affordability makes it to where the project just doesn't quite measure up with the cost to build versus the cost of recapture, that there's a gap financing funding source. We work with our home and community development block grant dollars, working with Foundation for Excellence. We stay abreast and work in collaboration with any new incentives, such as the Kalamazoo County Housing for All millage that was recently announced, and hopefully an RFP comes out before too long. So we're working to coordinate with the developers who are looking to get money from various sources and begin to layer their projects so that they work financially. And we work with financial institutions and donors. So that's a second bubble that we're simultaneously working on while we're working on the planning piece. And then with anything we do, we are always looking to develop partnerships. So whether it's with the local nonprofits, for-profit developers, our faith-based organizations who have buildings or opportunities for development, helping assist with either technical assistance for the development or just matching the various pieces to assist with making the development happen. We work with our local initiative support corporation, which is locally, some people know it just as LISC, local foundations and funders, residents, and then mentioned HUD before, and then MSHDA, which is Michigan State Housing Development Authority. So we partner with both HUD and MSHDA on any of our projects. So as I mentioned before, just as an example of planning for development, the rezoning initiative or strategies that we've been under for really about the last 18 months, they went on a little bit longer than we anticipated just because of COVID, but the alignment for the rezoning initiative was so that all of the individual parcels that we have in neighborhoods already would be conforming parcels for new construction, so that if you were going to build on them, that you wouldn't have to go to zoning to appeal that you are actually building a home in a neighborhood, and that's a acceptable use. If we just zone it correctly, then it's easy to build. So 3 bubbles in as far as planning for development, and then think of 3 bubbles when we think about who is our end user and who benefits from the new construction. So whenever we're looking at a housing strategy and housing development, we're thinking about how does this affect the resident and the home buyer? So how do we build in affordability, both short-term affordability and long-term affordability? So we're thinking about how do we incentivize, where do we build, what's the best strategy for alignment to build in affordability? We're also looking at density and access. So where should the most density, or where should we increase density, and where is there access or lack of access for the neighbors and the residents who will live there? And we're looking at diverse housing stock so that we can meet every classification of family. So we're looking at that resident home buyer. If we go down to that bottom box or bubble, we're looking at the neighborhood itself. And so we're looking at both the neighborhood and the development. Does this development fit the neighborhood? How does it impact or affect the neighborhood? Is it going to create neighborhood revitalization? Is it going to be an asset to the neighborhood? Is it going to bring any threats to the neighborhood? So really thinking of the neighborhood as a customer or as an end user. So when we're looking at the neighborhood and the development, we're looking at aligned development. What else is happening there? Is there any concentric energies that we can build on? We're looking at the impact and scope, and then preservation and creation of the neighborhood itself. So not just the creation of homes, but also what does it do to preserve the integrity of that neighborhood. And then the last bubble that we're looking at, which tends to be maybe a little bit more intangible to people who aren't entrenched in housing and development day in and day out, is the market itself. We are looking at the market. What does the market, how does the market benefit from this development? What does it do to the market? Does it move the needle positively? Is it going to have a negative impact? We always want it to have a positive impact. So we always are kind of looking at what unintended consequences could happen. So when we think about the market or indicators in development, we're thinking about the condition, and trends, both the short term and long term, what supports need to come into play, or what support should we be looking to build, and then what's the impact and what's the volatility of the market, and then how to really align and strategize for all different types of development and opportunities. So both for existing residents, new residents coming in, the neighborhood itself, and what's happening as a result of just current market and past markets within that particular radius or area. So let's get into a couple of the specifics on the strategy for housing redevelopment. And so one of the things we really looked at this year, cost of construction. I'm sure if you've heard anything on the news, you've heard the cost of construction right now is through the roof. Wood is just really expensive. OSB board, which it takes tons to build, is like 8 times, I can't remember, it was like $7 and sub on cents per sheet, and now it's 50 something. So it's just the cost went up after the pandemic. And so one of the strategies we looked at is we have existing homes. How do we take the existing homes and actually do redevelopment? So the strategy is called an ADR strategy, stands for acquisition, development, and resale. So we're looking at saying, okay, we have existing homes that are maybe either obsolete, they're potentially vacant, or they're blighted, or they're just homes that that whoever owns them just hasn't been able to keep up, and they're looking to sell in this market. And so could we partner to bring some of those homes onto the market and then do full rehabilitations on those? So with this strategy, we have to first start with who are our partners in this strategy. So we're looking to neighborhood associations and nonprofits. We might be looking at the private owners themselves and partnering with developers who do this type of work. Some people might know it as just either repairs or renovations or rehabilitation. So those words are kind of used synonymously. We're going to look at local foundations, because in this market, just because supply is low, that increases prices. So we might need to overinvest to actually bring these homes into the market and repurpose them and bring them to their place of vitality. So we're looking at partnering with our funding sources, FFE, the millage, our federal funds. And then for the acquisition, we're looking for our partners to do the acquisition. It would be to whether it's to take a bundle or to find someone who already owns properties and wants to see these properties brought back to their former glory. And so are partnering with us to put these homes back on the market for the purpose of ownership. So these homes would be sold on the open market with some sort of subsidies built in for affordable housing solutions. The impact of the ADR strategy is both to build affordable housing options. It preserves the existing house stock. It allows us to partner with our nonprofits in creative ways. So we do have a partnership right now with a couple nonprofits where they're doing a pathways to home partnership. So a person is starting in the rental phase and then working with a housing counselor to build up their financial portfolio so that they can become mortgage ready and then to buy the home. So it allows us to think creatively of how do we get people into homes. This strategy also encourages faith-based and collective ownership partnerships so that the non-traditional developer who owns land or who owns property, not land, who owns property, they can participate in this strategy. And then it expands developer opportunities, allows us to do the lease purchase, as I mentioned just a minute ago, the lease purchase strategy. And it is a response to the current market cost and inventory. Oops. The most kind of thought of when people say, oh, if they ask me what I do and I say I'm a housing developer, oh, you build houses. Yeah, that's one of the things. So this is the infill strategy. The infill strategy is new construction strategy. I kind of squeezed everything regarding the strategy onto one slide just to show at a quick glance. This is a really visible strategy, but there is a lot of pre-planning that goes into this strategy. So it does take a while before you start seeing houses just built, because so much, especially in today's market, so much goes into creating all of the additional resources that go in behind the scenes to make new construction happen, especially affordable new construction, because the cost of supplies is the cost of supplies. And so the cost to build a home doesn't fluctuate a lot, even though the market itself does. So the cost to build a home right now is a lot higher than what our market will support, meaning it costs more to build than you can to sell. So traditionally in a housing construction business model, you want to build the house for less than you can sell it for. So you make a profit. Well, in some of our underperforming markets, that just can't happen. It costs more to build than you can get to sell it. So we have to look at planning on the front end? What plans can we put in to help support this development? Who do we need to partner with? What additional partners do we need to bring to the table? So for our infill strategy, a couple of the new partners that you see on this slide from the previous slide was the Home Builders Association and Kalamazoo County Land Bank. So these are two partners that we partner with heavily with the infill housing. Kalamazoo County Land Bank owns a lot of the parcels that we have available in the city and can use creative strategies to help create affordability so that maybe there's an offset on the purchase of the property, because every penny we can save on the construction is a direct savings that gets passed on to the buyer. So that's what we're looking for. We have one of these strategies that we've used is in the center of the slide here, streamlined city supports. So we have a project review committee where if someone has an idea, they can bring it ahead of time to the project review committee and get a lot of insight from both zoning, the planners, and public works. So get an idea of what it would cost for water and just thinking of through those public services. So it is a strategy that helps to cut costs through both time and that pre-planning that a developer can do. Another strategy for the infill housing that we've done is really, we are working to integrate department services. So I'm going to give Kevin a little props here. So one of the ways we're doing that is, so I'm here talking about our housing strategy because Kevin's work and my work does interface. And so although Kevin doesn't do anything directly with housing and I don't do anything directly with SBK, our services and what we're offering to the community match perfectly. So if there are plans and strategies happening in certain neighborhoods, or if there are certain opportunities available in certain areas, if I can partner development, we can start to begin to build on all of the different strategies and incentives already going on within our neighborhoods. And then the other thing that the city really has done to strategize for housing is brought on a new position. So housing development project coordinator. So that's a piece to this strategy because there is a lot of energies that have to go into this strategy. Financial incentives are with infill housing is really like lasagna. You have to build it layer by layer. A lot of times there are multiple funding sources that go into both an infill housing strategy and a multifamily affordable housing strategy. So there are many different financial incentives that we are looking for and looking to. With an infill housing strategy, it allows us to actually build new, which a market always needs new construction. New construction's kind of always pushing the needle of the market values and bringing a newfound vitality to the market. So any market really does need new housing happening within it. And then it also helps to support the existing housing stock, because as new housing drives the market needle, the existing housing stock gets the advantage of that. One of the biggest advantages, though, of an infill housing strategy really is it allows us to bring the necessary variety of housing. So whether it's single family detached, which is what we're used to seeing, where it's just a single home and maybe a single garage on a single lot, it's called detached housing. It allows us to bring that form or variety of housing, but it also allows us to think about, is there an opportunity for single family attached housing? So this is more like the townhome type where there is a wall shared. And so maybe there are areas where there could be additional density created and affordability through an attached housing or maybe a condominium style living arrangement. Also allows us to look at, are there opportunities for duplexes or fourplexes where there's ownership opportunities within these units, but they're a shared building. Once again, bringing up that accessory dwelling unit. So the little pictures on the side here, that top one that says garage ADU, ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. That's an example of what this would look like. So you'd have this really nice looking 2-car garage, but there would be an apartment. It could be a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment. Could potentially provide income, but also would be an opportunity to provide affordable living options. So it's a cool concept that this ADU, this garage ADU, is actually going to be one of our first available pre-permitted plans. Allows us to look at multifamily mixed income approaches. So if you're thinking of a duplex model, it could be where a person owns the whole structure and lives in one side and rents out the other. Or it could be a situation where it's a condo type arrangement and you could have both a market rate unit and an affordable unit side by side. And so that's mixed income. It allows us to think about mixed use type situations. Is there a commercial element plus an ownership element in a structure or a unit? And then also, once again, with that mixed income, thinking about mixed income neighborhoods to bring in a variety of incomes, which brings a stability to the neighborhood and to the market. Multifamily dwelling units, I'm not going to spend tons of time on, but we do have these happening. The city's been really good about attracting multifamily opportunities, and we've had quite a few units through multifamily rental opportunities. And so there is still a whole host of strategies that have to go on behind the scenes for multifamily dwelling units. Most of the multifamily dwelling units that we have seen go up in the past 2 years are rental. And so these with rental multifamily dwelling units, a lot of times the state is involved, whether it's through the low income housing tax credit programs or whether it's through some sort of environmental cleanup where the state environmental comes in to help assist with that. There are additional federal funds that go in to help the large amount of unit development. So, but the impact of multifamily that we're really seeing that is quite exciting is that our multifamily units are bringing mixed income. So we have affordable units and we have marketplace units, and all the units are built the same. So there's not a delineation between quality of units. It's just that there are additional subsidies built in so that the developer can offer affordable units and prices as well as the market rate, which allows the project itself to perform. Also, with these multifamily units, we're able to look at mixed uses. So you see those downtown where there's a commercial element and then rentals up top. And then we're thinking about that too as we enter this sort of post-pandemic era of, it may be that people are now looking for a home office space as well as a living space. So we might need to start looking at additional strategies that would allow a mixed use on a smaller residential quasi look scale. Senior housing, variety of housing stock plus meeting the family, the existing, oh, sorry, did something. Is it still up on your guys' end?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know what happened on my end though. So I guess I just skipped a slide here. So for senior housing, we do have some, this is kind of cool. We've begun to engage some of the faith-based community that they're looking to do some senior development for their congregation. And so, as I mentioned, some of the faith-based community owns property and land. And so they're able to look at their populations or their demographics and identify to us a need. And so with the senior housing, we're really looking at those developers who have already identified the needs and have already done sort of that neighborhood and community reach out to figure out what is needed so that there's a long-term affordability and allows people to age in place. And so, though a couple of those developments are in the works, not with bricks and mortar, but with some of those behind the scene planning pieces. And then also, and I think this might be close to lastly, when we're thinking about housing development and redevelopment, we're not just thinking about what's out there to build new, to attract new owners or create affordability for new people coming in. We also need to look to partner with existing residents and existing owners. So we do partner, as I mentioned, with nonprofit organizations to do housing repair and rehabilitation programs for existing homeowners. So the more we can look at a holistic approach to support everybody that's there, everybody that's going to be there, as well as the neighborhood, and respect the market, the healthier this development, any development, is going to look, and our end users are going to remain in safe, affordable housing. So we partner with Community Homeworks, KNHS, Senior Services, Habitat, neighborhood associations for existing homeowner repair and rehabilitation. We also have partnered with HUD, as I mentioned. With HUD, we do have funding that KNHS, Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, is currently administering, but it is a lead-based paint program. And so you do have to have a child under the age of 6 living in the home for your home to be eligible for this grant financing to remediate lead issues in the home. And by a child of the age of 6, that could be a child that you have, but it could also be if you're a grandparent who watches your grandchildren and your grandchildren are consistently in the home, your home still could be eligible for lead-based paint remediation. And that partnership, as I mentioned, starts with KNHS, but we do have information about this program also on our website at the city's website. And so this is an opportunity to preserve our existing housing, to also have that safe and responsible redevelopment, creates affordable home ownership. So this is an example of a home that qualified. On this particular home, because it had the wood sashes, there was a window replacement that happened with the home, all for the purpose of lead remediation. So it is making a huge impact and preserving housing stock. And then because it's a grant, the homeowner maintains affordability. Lastly, when I was brought on, one of the things we talked about is aligned development and looking at impact. So one of the things shortly after I was able to come on, I was able to see how much money got put into development. So when I looked, it was just shy of 9 million. I was able to pull units, how many units were developed. But we hadn't really designed a way to measure impact. And so right now we're working on utilizing our GIS, the geographical integrated system mapping. I think that's geographical information system mapping. Yeah, that sounds right. Integrating the GIS services that we have. So this is just behind the scenes here. This is just kind of an example of a real basic map that GIS can pull out. But what we're doing is writing in the metrics we want to see. So with this particular metric and this particular map, we're saying, okay, what development's already happening here? What other services are being offered here? what type of monies are going into this particular neighborhood or this particular area. And we're able to draw a radius around the area or the area of aligned development. And we'll be able to lock that area and begin to see over the next 3 years, what type of impacts are we seeing? And then what type of impacts do investment or disinvestment make to our areas to strategically approach both current and future development opportunities. So I'm really excited about this one. This is taking a lot of energies for existing staff and myself included, but I think it will really be a useful tool going forward so that we're not just seeing the dollars and the units, but we're ultimately looking at the impact. So I think, oh, questions. That is it. That is all I have. So.
Questions, members?
I do have one quick question. I'm making sort of an assumption with one of the slides, but I wanted to just check it and make sure that I'm correct. So you mentioned, I think, challenged markets, or I forget the exact language you used, underperforming markets. Sorry, I think it was. And I assume that our SBK priority neighborhoods are, in most cases, would be considered underperforming markets. But I wanted to explicitly ask about, as we think about the neighborhoods that we are focused on, are there specific dynamics that you would lift up? Are those underperforming markets? What does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the SBK neighborhoods would be, and what I mean by underperforming is if you look at the average market within the city of Kalamazoo, the prices or the values are consistently thousands of dollars higher than the core or the SBK neighborhoods. So what that means for the market is that it's just not performing to the same level as the higher income neighborhoods. And so when I talk about development to kind of push that needle, it's to maximize the investment of housing, as well as balance it with just the need for affordable. But you don't want to create just affordable housing at the expense of the investment of housing, because for most families, housing is the single best investment that you can make. But if you inadvertently or an unintended consequence develop in a way that stymies or holds a market static, you are going to actually impact the investment of the residents that live there. So yes, when I'm talking about underperforming, I am talking specifically about the investment part of that market.
Thank you. And that's so critical for this committee to be thinking about, because to your exact point, like there has been such there's so many historical dynamics that play into that, right? As you and I know many others around this table are familiar with, of just the chronic sort of underinvestment, segregation, just all of the impacts that have created that outcome. And to your point, it is, the biggest key to generational wealth, to people's assets. And so I really appreciate your updating us today, because I do think as we think about wealth and poverty, housing is such a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Pulley?
Thank you. I used the raise hand feature. Don't know if all of us utilize that, but I appreciate the PowerPoint. Appreciate the overview, and kind of pulling the thread what Alyssa said is there a particular sort of community visioning type strategy that allows residents and those who have interest in the community and how they see the houses that come into this particular market? I think an example that was presented later on in the presentation was like faith-based groups identified, seniors as a priority. I would imagine, these faith-based organizations were in tune with those residents, they identified it as a potential need. And I wanted to know, is that sort of embedded in the process? And just curious to know what your thinking is around it and sort of how you execute that.
Mhm. Yes, so right now with our neighborhood plans, having those is such a cool tool because anything we're looking at with development, we will measure it right up with that plan. Is this what residents indicated they want, or is this outside? Is it outside completely, or is it slightly outside? And what we've been doing is, even if it's slightly outside, we've been making a connection with the neighborhood association right away to bring in residents. So for instance, earlier this year, there was a development project that the city is privy to and a part of. And it's a redevelopment. So it's a rehab strategy. And we contacted the neighborhood association to say, can you do a reach out? We also contacted a block group. Can you do a reach out? We're going to be at these units. Any residents have interest and want to have input to come on out, meet us there. And then we'll have a follow-up from that meeting at the neighborhood association. If it's completely outside, then we also start with the neighborhood association. If the neighborhood association says, nope, then we say, nope, not right now. And we focus on some of the other strategies. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Coney?
First of all, thank you. That's so impressive what you're doing. It's just so great. I think you started to answer my question just as you were there, and that's a question of gentrification. Sometimes you hear, oh, if you start making improvements in the neighborhood, you're going to price out the people that are renting here. How do you deal with that?
Mhm. Yeah, and that concerns a legitimate concern, which is why it is important when we think about development that the market itself is one of our end users. And I think sometimes when we think about development strategies, we focus on the resident or the homeowner, and we focus on the neighborhood because we're going to drive by this and what does it look like and how does it make me feel? But we lose sight of the market, and every string that you pull has something attached to it. So it is a piece where you have to do very responsible and aligned development, to where when you're doing market rate development, you're simultaneously doing affordable development, so that the teeter-totter is doing this and climbing its way up, versus all of a sudden you found yourself in a situation where, oh wow, we totally misscaled that, and now we have these unintended consequences. So it does really require an aligned approach, and one where those that are involved in putting the incentives and the funding and the pre-planning together have their eye on all the different pieces that are happening. Who's saying they're going to develop here? If the faith-based is doing a senior complex and its ownership, is it 100% affordable? How is that going to look? What can happen around that development so that when you're pulling these strings, you're thinking about both that front end and that back end strategy. Mm-hmm. So really the best thing I can say is that we have to keep our eye on the market as a customer. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but as an impact, as a true impact piece, what is this doing to the market? And how do we responsibly develop so that we don't all of a sudden find, wait, we just really messed that market up. So yeah.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing, I'll say one thing else too. So that shared equity land trust idea that I threw out there that we're looking at, that's one of the specifics about what responsible development looks like, where you're taking an approach where it's possible that you're going to all of a sudden get more market rate development in an area. So how can we gain some permanent affordability through factoring in both the market that wants to buy there and can afford to buy there, but making that particular development being socially responsible for the long-term affordability. So both the market rate units would be responsible for long-term affordability, and the affordable units would be responsible for a long-term affordability. So it's marrying the both the markets and saying both of you are going to be responsible to the future. Yeah.
Ms. Hughes?
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in the piece around the housing that exists now, but the owners haven't been able to keep up repairs and this and that. And I heard you say you may, or a developer may buy those up and everything, but I'm interested in how you can help the homeowners keep those without them, because in lots of cases, that's the only thing that they own, but they haven't been able, and there has not been a lot of help with people in that income level trying to pay their taxes and their utilities and all that, and do any major repairs as they come along. I mean, I think there's been no interest rate loans along the way from the city, but there's no room for any kind of loan in a lot of those situations. So I can see with this strategy, I can see none of the residents or the former residents owning those properties anymore. And, everything being a developer and that's another thing. I mean, developers get tax incentives and this and that. Homeowners don't get that. So I'm really interested around the piece of keeping the people who own those places, owning those places and being able to rehab them and this and that. I was also interested in what you said about all the partners that have repair programs in the neighborhoods, because I'm also on the East Side neighborhood board and have been for years. I'm just not familiar that there's, I'm not familiar that there's been any help like that. And I'm also public housing commissioner for 15 years.
I know.
So I'm not familiar with all that at all.
Yeah. So really most years, and it is unfortunate. I hear this. I didn't know those were available. Yeah. So most years we do have a grant repair program that is offered in the community. And so that is traditionally that's for critical repair pieces. Might cover furnaces, pipes, roof repairs, I don't know, steps broke. And those are all grant programs. We always, traditionally, we will have some sort of roof repair or roof replacement program that's run. For the past few years, we have had a tax relief that we partner with the county on the tax relief
foreclosure
help or assistance. Yeah, foreclosure. Thank you. And then the homeowner, like the lead-based paint, that's a grant. So if there's somebody who has any home built prior to 1978, which are hundreds of our homes with a child under the age of 6, they would be eligible. That's a grant program. And it is important to note, when I say developers, I am not making a distinction between, a large developer or a single person who wants to do a renovation and sell it on the open market as an affordable home ownership opportunity. So, any single person on this call, if they were saying, hey, I own a property and I ultimately would like this to be an affordable housing unit, what can I do? I would consider you a developer. So it is important to know my language is anybody who wants to ultimately create ownership opportunities whether it be a single entity or a large, corporation.
Yeah,
Oh.
most of the time those single people don't have developer money. No, that's the problem.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Any
Thank you.
others?
I
So,
think Sakia had her hand up.
oh,
You didn't? Okay.
so I have a couple, I guess. So I was listening and we know how much it costs to build a new house. And so we also know that in all of our neighborhoods or all around the city, we have houses that have been condemned. And they've been condemned for what this reason, that reason, whatever it might be. So my question is, how are we diving into these condemned locations, which I would think, but I don't know, I would think would cost less than building a new house?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with that. I don't have a list of the condemned houses, so that's not currently on my strategy. But
Well, sounds like we need to get a list to you.
yeah, so I would be more than interested in looking at that. It is sometimes you're absolutely right. Sometimes the cost to rehab a blighted property is less. But sometimes, depending on the environmental or the lead in it, sometimes, unfortunately, the cost of rehab doesn't make sense when it comes to what it would cost to bring that structure that structure's integrity up to where it needs to be. So sometimes, believe it or not, it's still. But I don't know if I could say that today, given the cost of lumber. So yeah, so I'd be more than happy to look at that list and look at that strategy. You can tell that could be a really cool strategy, but I haven't looked at it thus far.
Yeah. So you folks have access to that. And so don't expect us to send it. Should be somebody walking down to the office down the way of the planner or whomever and asking for that information. And Director Bonner, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, but we should have that information and the county should have that information. So it just seems like it needs to be in our portfolio of strategies. If we're talking about infill housing, we should have a recovery of housing strategy as well. If we're going to deal with the challenges of building new. The other thing is I'm going to continue to ask what's going on with our contractors of color that we invested dollars in and trained them, and how are we using them from a prosperity standpoint, the opportunity for them to be prosperous and helping us deal with the housing stock, the rehabilitations. Do we have some of these folks that are working with community homework? So we have some of these folks with the builders group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where our investment has gone there and where we've had impact.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not know that, being that you're fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be for more Director Bonner or Coordinator Ford. And the last thing I'll ask about, I'm trying to understand and how do I phrase this? I heard you talk about zoning and the ADUs, I think it's ADUs, adult accessory dwelling units. We've been talking about that for years. And, I'm going to ask, do we have policy now? Some of the zoning information that you've raised, we've talked about that for years. Do we have zoning ordinances in place? I guess I'm not clear on if we've done these things or we're working still to get there. To allow for accessory dwelling units. And don't get me wrong, I know rezoning of an area or whatever, that takes a different sort of time. I was on the zoning board, I was on the planning commission. I don't need that education, but I guess I'm wondering, where are we in that temporal nature of this work? It sounds like we're it felt like we were doing, but I'm not sure that's the case. So help
Yeah,
clarify that.
so, yeah, so that is the case. We are actually, construction on our first one is supposed to happen this month. Yep, so that is good. The rezoning to allow the accessory dwelling place has taken place in most of the sort of the residential areas. There's still a couple, so we just had one go to commission about the changing of, a manufacturing zone to a live work. So there's still a couple outliers, but yes, the sort of the inner pieces, the core places where we're looking at development, zoning has been completed to allow. These are allowable units. These are no longer non-conforming, it's allowable. And so the duplex and the ADU pre-permitted our first ones are supposed to start this month. And then our single family and our fourplex will be later in the year. So yeah, we are actually, I can report good news on that front.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then my other thing, and I'm sorry the deputy city manager left, but Ms. Bonner and Mr. Ford know I'm going to ask this question about what our goals and targets are. So it's great to say what we did, but what did we aim for? And did we hit what we aimed for? Sorry to use that analogy, or did we miss? Or did we exceed? Or, so I don't need that now, but it would be nice to know what our game plan is and what our goals are. And then going to Mr. Pulley's statement or question for a second. So the neighborhood plans, the Imagine Kalamazoo, all of these have been huge input opportunities for folks in the neighborhood. And of course, there's the other planning that goes on with the neighborhoods. And so there are things that the neighborhoods are doing in regards to that engagement that's aggressive, and not a bad aggressive, but aggressive, and continue to be ramped up as well. So I just wanted to mention that. But anyway, Director Bonner, I saw your hand and I saw you unmute your mic. So
yes, I did want to give you some more good news.
All right, we'll take it.
We met with the Home Builders Association I think in the end of May. And from our 2019 work with the minority contractors, they do have 2 minority contractors that are working with them as builders for this new project they're working on. And I'm also happy to say that they are revamping with Melody from the Community Investment Division, the work with minority contractors. So we did get some positive results from that.
Okay. Cool. I don't know how many we had, so there's some, again, not trying to be negative, but I don't know how many completed and how many we had. If we had 40 and we have 2, we've done something. I agree, but what was our hope for and what's our opportunity still? It seems like we still have an opportunity there. But if we had 10 and we got 2, that's certainly better number percentage wise. Other questions? Well, thank you, Ms. Parsons, for your hard work and for the report. And we'll look forward to hearing more and look forward to supporting that work where we can. So
yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, all.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Item 7, unfinished business, Mr. Ford.
I don't think we have anything for that.
Do we have any updates on these grants and things and the grantees at all?
The cohort, yeah, we finished. I finished the 101s with all of the cohort members in terms of the agreement. We had the agreement template approved by city attorney. So we're in the process of getting everything signed. Checks can't go out or dollars can't go out until we acquire signatures. So out of the 8, I got 2 signatures already. And again, one-on-ones are finished, so we want to give them time to, if they got any type of legal department or legal representation, to have their folks look at it. And we just all get on the same page on deliverables and whatnot. So that's where the cohort is at right now.
Okay, would it be helpful for anybody else to have a document that shows where we are in this work? So for example, when we had Imagine Kalamazoo, we had plan, design, blah, 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 and it sort of showed us where we were, and it had months. Okay, we're now in the design stage, we're now in the planning stage, so that when whether we're giving out grants or doing whatever other work, we can at least see where we're at and not need to ask the question as much. I don't know if that would help anybody else, but it certainly would help me. So
Okay. And
I'm
I
just
have
throwing it out there, and don't say okay, because I don't know what everyone thinks, but
no, I'm
don't do
just
this because I asked.
no, I'm just appreciating what you put out there. But I have been trying to give regular updates to you all
Right.
in terms of where we're at and status updates. And so that's what I was using. If you were talking about specifically a visual in addition to that, that's something, if folks need that, we can have that discussion.
Yeah, I know it's you give a report, and I do read your reports, as a matter of fact. My thing is there could be something that's a quick hit visual that allows folks to understand that, this is where we even targeted to be in October or December or whatever. I don't know what it looks like. If people want something, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. Anyway, I see a few nods of the head. Kevin, we can talk about that. Let's you and I and Carol talk about it. And maybe there's something we can do if folks want it. I don't want to create a whole bunch of other work. Maybe can take the place of something or something of that nature. I don't know, but we'll explore it, folks.
All right.
Miscellaneous, returning to in-person meetings. So I know I normally let all y'all speak. Yeah, I'm over this. So if you are, I know the city put out their policy or whatever, but for goodness sakes, can we please get back in a room and engage, because this is driving me crazy. So that's me. So. Kevin, you wanted to speak on it, so I interrupted.
I sent you all the information from the city, and that's what that's where we're at in terms of policy. An update I sent you all today. Probably looking to return to in-person in September. But yeah, that's all I was going to provide.
Sooner the better for me. I don't know what anybody else thinks. But. So, is there a reason September, not August?
Yeah, that was in the email. I think City Commission got a recommendation, and they didn't really move on it in terms of returning to August. Vice Mayor may want to chime in.
I would love to hear the Vice Mayor chime in on this.
Hi there, everyone. Vice Mayor Griffin speaking. So yeah, at our last commission meeting, the city staff did present a list of recommendations, and there were several commissioners that lifted up that we as commission weren't party to that process. So right now there's input being taken from commission with the decision on how we're going to go back. For me personally, it's all about continuing to have the interaction of the community. There was a study that was done that was presented at our last committee of the whole that showed that since COVID, we have had an increase in engagement in our meetings. And part of that is due to us being accessible online and so on and so forth. So for me, whatever we decide or whenever we decide to go back in person, my only thing is that we make sure that we continue to have the access virtually. And then speaking with this committee, we meet at 12:30 and we almost had no one ever show up to our meetings, where now, because they're at least aired virtually. We have so many people engaged, and I would like to just continue on with that. And so I think there's some, I know SPK was one of the committees that was lifted up to be able to continue with the live streaming and continue with people being able to call in with their questions and concerns. Excuse me, but that's the reason why there's no date set in stone and why the suggestion is looking at September. But I believe we'll be discussing this at our next commission meeting.
Okay. Thanks for the update. So we'll stay tuned on how we're going to get back together, folks. And yeah, and with the access, you know, I get all of that. We also need to make sure that we're all in the meeting, because sometimes when we have some of these, because I've read a lot of stuff, thank you, Mr. Pulley, shaking your head. I've been reading some things about commissions and boards that are hovering on Facebook while meetings are going on, and that becomes how people are commenting as commissioners and board members, where if you have a tool for folks to use to access your meetings, we need to use that tool but stay focused on the meeting. So there's always and I'm not pushing out there that this doesn't happen or anything. I just think that we have to also be working with folks that are serving and how you operate within that realm. And I don't think there's been a lot of guidance given on that either. So anyway, and we've learned a lot over the last 18 months, no doubt about it. So, all right. With that said, it's public comment time. Any public comment?
Oh, I had one thing with miscellaneous too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, my bad.
We have a shared prosperity podcast. We'll be recording this week. We started recording last week. We got to edit and chop up some things, but it's hosted by myself and colleague Melody Dakin from Community Investment Division. And so wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I will probably be reaching out to more than a couple of you to be guests on that as well. But it's a first for the city. I think it's exciting. We got some good feedback on it so far, and look forward to recording episodes and talking to folks in the community and looking to get some national guests as well.
If you start teaching master's classes, Kevin, when we all having to pay for that stuff, I'm gonna be feeling like, wait a minute, we used to have access for that for free from the man. Now we're paying for it all. No, but good to hear that. Any other miscellaneous items? Do we have any citizens? Oh, go ahead.
This is the final thing. We have a project, Westnedge and Park project. We're gonna be doing some community engagement. Wanted to put that on everybody's radar as well. It's a small piece of a larger traffic calming operation that's going to happen. And so the goal of the project is to make short-term improvements towards creating safe streets, reducing speeding, and removing transportation barriers, and aligning land use and transportation. So just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I may be sending an email out in terms of if we have some engagement opportunities, invite you all, spread it across your networks. But we're looking to do engagement in August. And so just wanted to put that out there and let everybody know about that as well.
Okay, any other miscellaneous items? Once, twice? All right, do we have any public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for being here, and enjoy the very gloomy weather we have today, and appreciate everyone's time and energy. We stand adjourned.
All right, take care.
You are.